One day while my wife was at work, something happened that made her see one of her coworkers in a different, more romantic light. I didn't know it when it happened. I only noticed that she was really giggly and happy when she came home from work. I thought she was pleased with her new position and pay. She wouldn't tell me about anyone she met at work. She worked there for an entire year and never told me about anybody. She did mention that it was the first time she attended a fire drill and it felt real. That was not very interesting, but I pretended it was and asked her more questions. She was just vague about the rest, but she started to blush, so I took this as a chance to ask her why she never told me about work. She was surprised I asked and seemed offended for some reason. She said she didn't think she had to report everything to me. That was a red flag. I told her she didn't, but I'd think she'd want me to be involved with her work life, at least by her telling me things she liked or didn't like. I mentioned how she knew all the guys I worked with at the garage because she came by often for lunch. My wife allowed me little room for privacy and even checked my phone often. I didn't care, I had nothing to hide, but she never asked if I wanted to look at her phone. When I became suspicious that she was hiding something at work, I asked her if I could look at her phone. She told me she left it at work and left immediately, despite my objection. While she was gone, I looked on her Facebook and searched for her friends. There were only 3 girls that worked with her. I decided to message one, begging her not to tell my wife anything. I needed to know if there was anything romantic going on between my wife and someone in the office. She replied in a most shocking way. She was apologetic and said she didn't know my wife was married. She saw that during a fire drill at their office, a man that spoke daily to my wife played a romantic rescuer and swept her off her feet to carry her down 4 flights of stairs after her high heel broke. I expressed my shock to this woman and literally physically felt my heart breaking. I didn't want to believe it, but I didn't think she'd lie to me. I asked her how often this super guy spoke to my wife. She reaffirmed daily. I felt terrible because this guy sounded heroic and desirable. This was probably why my wife had been so giggly and didn't want to let me look at her phone. She didn't get home until really late, and she smelled different. She acted guilty and distant, even though she was willing to hand me her phone because she had all that time to delete whatever she wanted. She asked for my phone, and even though I was heavily considering divorce, I didn't care. I let her look, and she got mad at me for the conversation with the woman at her job. She added that her coworker was lying, but I think that was because she felt she had to say that. I told her I didn't believe a word she said, and pointed out that she smelled like another man. Of course, she said it was because she went to her dad's house for a while, but I didn't believe her because of how odd her behavior was. Just then, my phone rang. My wife handed it to me slowly, probably wondering if she should let me answer it. It was someone I worked with at the garage. He said he knew his call was really unexpected because we never spoke before, but he wanted to tell me something he felt I needed to know. I pleaded with him to continue on speakerphone. My wife looked extremely on edge, like she just knew it was going to be about her. He said he had a roommate that worked at a company that my wife also worked at. He said the guy had been talking about a girl he started an office romance with, but he didn't realize it was my wife until tonight when she came over and went upstairs with him for 3 hours. My wife started yelling that it was bull even before he finished his sentence. She swore up and down it wasn't her, and my coworker actually yelled back at her that it was and called her some really despicable things. I was blown away yet again. This was a terrible night. I asked him if I could stay there, and he welcomed me. He said he would kick out his roommate immediately for what he did. My wife was disturbed to hear that her AP just lost his place to live. On top of it, she took off her wedding rings and stared at the absent mark on her finger. She was about to boil over, and the most upset I had ever seen her. She started screaming, shoving stuff off shelves and the kitchen counters. A ton of stuff broke, but I left. I didn't give a crap, and I didn't want her to turn on me. The more of a mess it was, the more likely she wouldn't bring AP over. I had some man-to-man time and made an unexpected friend in my coworker. We only talked for the first few minutes about what my wife did, then we changed to distracting and entertaining topics for my sanity. By the morning, I had decided to divorce. This was something I never expected my wife to do, and I needed to place my trust in someone else. She wasn't even apologetic. Her behavior was rampant, and she destroyed things in her craziness. When I gave her the papers, she acted like she didn't care, but also said she wouldn't sign them. I waited 2 months, and she actually returned them to me at work, probably so she could embarrass me or find another man's attention or something. I didn't believe her intentions were innocent. AP hadn't been back to work, probably because he had no choice but to move far away. I guess my wife had to clean up her mess at the house all on her own. It was 4 months after that my wife called me, sobbing. She said she hadn't been with anyone and was struggling to forgive herself or feel worthy. I wasn't sure what to say, because she certainly broke my heart and acted like a fool. I simply told her she needed to improve who she was. She needed to stop behaving like an entitled, angry girl and treat the man she wants in her life with respect and love. She should behave like she would want to be treated. I told her I thought she already knew this, but it wasn't too late for her to learn and behave properly. I've since moved on and have started getting used to the single life. Being single isn't as bad as people make it seem. OP, I am so sorry you've had to put up with this betrayal. It's never easy, but it is perfect karma that your wife felt unworthy after she made you feel unworthy. I'm glad you had a good friend and a coworker that told you what was going on. What a small world. It's never okay to allow another romantic interest into your life if you've committed to another person. Thank you for sharing your story. It's a great way to remind people of the importance of remaining loyal and communicative with their partners. Now, let's get into today's second story. My girlfriend, 28, and I, 29, were together for 5 years, and I was about to propose to her. I put $35,000 into the house I bought for us to live in. Of course, I didn't tell her I thought of it as our marital home yet. She was a very patient and independent woman. She didn't depend on me to survive, and she took pride in her well-kept apartment. It was nice, but I knew she was going to be thrilled to share the new home with me. One day, she asked me if we could go out for a really nice meal, and I told her I was just about to call her and ask her out. While waiting for our orders, I had crazy butterflies and was sweating through my suit. Just as I was about to burst out my proposal, she told me she had something to tell me. I held my breath while she explained that she was going to wait until after we ate, for fear of us losing our appetites, but she needed to tell me now. She took a deep breath and said we needed to take a break. My jaw dropped and my eyes started watering. I felt like I was punched in the face or chest. I couldn't breathe and I pinched myself hard to make sure this wasn't a nightmare. I asked her why, and she said it was because we had issues and needed to figure out these things before continuing our relationship. I asked her what issues, and she couldn't really pinpoint anything, so she eventually resorted to the cliche response of having to work on herself and figure out who she was. I was becoming furious. I told her I had no idea what was going on and thought everything was great between us. I reminded her we were together for 5 years, and she winced as it bothered her to hear that. Before the food came to the table, she got up, said a tearful goodbye, and walked out. I couldn't believe what I was experiencing. My heart was racing, and I felt like the stupidest person in the world. I ate both plates of food, and then I went home, sulking. I called my mom, and it was the first time in 15 years she heard me cry. She came over to my place, made me tea, and cleaned for me. We talked, and she helped me to realize I was still young and could meet another girl easily. I realized how angry I was at my ex for failing to inform me that she was struggling with our relationship. I didn't call her, not even once. 6 months went by without a word, and I was sure we were over. There was no way she was staying abstinent all that time, that much was certain. Suddenly, she called me. She was crying and said she was ready to take me back. I asked her what the heck was going on, why I hadn't heard from her in 6 months, and why she thought it was okay to just call me back and expect everything to be fine. She said she traveled during that time and found herself. She felt whole, complete, like she was ready to settle down and have a family. This was all I could ever dream of, but something felt really off. I hung up on her because I needed to think. 20 minutes later, my stepbrother called me. We were not close at all, and at first, I didn't even know who was calling because I didn't have his number programmed. First, he apologized for not being closer to me. This was so odd and completely out of the blue, I was stunned and silent. He said he wasn't the best person and didn't want to spoil me by getting close and giving me bad ideas. Then came the real reason why he called. He said he'd been dating a girl for the past 6.5 years and only now realized that she was the same woman I was dating 6 months ago. I swear it felt like my heart split in two and started crawling out of my ears. He went on to say that over the course of that time, she had certain days she would work extra hours or spend time away from him, and he never thought twice about it because she was independent and trustworthy. Since he and I weren't close and he avoided social media, he never knew we were dating the same woman. He said he was going to propose to her last week, months after she started spending more time with him. That's when Mom called him and said she saw the same girl on my Facebook that he introduced her to. He looked at the pictures she showed him of me and the woman he was prepared to commit his life to. What were the chances she'd meet and keep both of us for years without the other knowing? I apologized to him for dating the same woman and also for not maintaining a relationship before and asked if we could get together. He agreed, and while we hung out, our woman tried to call each of us several times. She texted us identical texts, and it was nauseating. We used a digital camera to take a picture of the phones side by side with identical messages. Then he transferred the picture and sent it to her, telling her she was double dumped and not to contact either of us again. It was the best feeling ever. She went silent for a while, and I took pleasure in picturing her losing her mind over the fact that we even knew each other. She did try to call a few more times, but I think she eventually accepted it. What other choice did she have? My brother and I started building a friendship, and I tagged her Facebook in the photo of the two phones, with text explaining all of what happened. Over 500 people reacted because of how large our ex's Facebook friends list was. One of those people was her work supervisor, the third person she was sleeping with. She was fired without reason, and per the company policy, they didn't have to provide her with one. Consequences strike again. Her life came crumbling down after we discovered her lies. It felt like we did a good deed by exposing a woman con artist, so that's how we wasted a chunk of our lives with the same woman. A part of me wonders if somehow she knew we were stepbrothers, but it doesn't matter anymore. My brother's met another girl who's just fine, and I've crossed her off from my list of potential dates. Wow, OP. I'm sorry you had to go through this ordeal. It's a shame neither of you knew what she was up to. It sounds like she thought too highly of herself and behaved like a little sneak, backstabbing at least 3 men. She took pride in being independent, but really she had 3 times the amount of attention and deserved none of it. I don't know what made her believe that what she was doing was okay. Perhaps she just didn't think anything through, or never thought of anyone but herself and how she could benefit. No one deserves to be taken advantage of for years, and this woman got at least some of the karma she deserved. I'm glad you and your stepbrother have developed a friendship after this mess. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.